Okay, so Eisenhower's new look on foreign policy was to fight against communist expansion while keeping defense spending low by advocating the use of covert operations instead of full-out military intervention. And in case you didn't get it that time, I'm going to explain it one more time in like a simpler version. So basically, Eisenhower's new look on foreign policy was created just to fight communist expansion while saving money at the same time. So instead of using military action and spending all that money on that, they used covert operations, which is where the CIA comes in. And 3 different countries where Eisenhower and the Dulles brothers saw a threat to national security, like communist threats to national security, were in Iran, Guatemala, and Indonesia. So those are 3 examples instead of 2 examples. And I'll go more into detail about it in a little bit. So basically, Eisenhower feared that the spread of communism under his domino theory. And if you guys don't remember the domino theory, it was basically if one country fell to communism, its neighbors would soon follow. So now I'm going to talk about Iran, Guatemala, and Indonesia. So basically, one of the best known covert actions or operations of the CIA was the overthrow of the Iranian government headed by Mohammad Mossadegh and the subsequent installation of the Shah into power. So basically what this was, it was a coup d'etat that the CIA planned, but while it was successful in a large part due to CIA money, materials, and strategy, the CIA didn't act alone and they did have help from the British. So basically, how the British come into play with this is that the British owned a company called the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, AIOC, and Iranian oil was basically a crucial part for Great Britain during World War II, and this control over Iranian oil that the British had was a great means of revenue for them. But the problem was that the Iranian people believed that their deal with this company that the British owned was unfairly benefiting only the company and not really Iran. So a man named Mohammad Mossadegh, who was a member of the Iranian parliament, demanded a renegotiation of the standing agreement between Iran and this company. And the Iranian people were quick to rally behind him because this was something that they wanted. They wanted a renegotiation. And since so many people rallied behind him, he basically became the first democratically elected leader. But in the same sense, the U.S. had a huge problem with him because Mossadegh refused to follow through with any of the United States requests. And it was also feared that he would join forces with the Soviet Union. So, as a result of this, and as a result of the U.S.'s fear of him joining with the Soviet Union and not working with the request of the U.S., and then Britain losing their control of Iran's oil field, the MI6, which is basically the CIA of Britain, and the CIA joined forces and they worked together to stage a coup d'etat in Iran, which was headed by actually Kermit Roosevelt, who was Theodore Roosevelt's grandson. So the purpose of this coup d'etat was to return the Shah to power through CIA and MI6 protests and the bribery of Iranian officers. So basically they paid people to protest for them but assumed the position or assumed the disguise of being a part of the Communist Party. So if there was protest by the quote-unquote Communist Party, then it gave the U.S. military a means to come into Iran and basically save Iran from a takeover of communists. So basically their first phase of trying to get the Shah back into power was unsuccessful, and the Shah ended up fleeing Tehran in fear that his life was in danger for participating in the attempted overthrow of Mossadegh. But the second phase was successful, and it enabled the Shah to returned to Iran, where he then had a 25-year dictatorship supported by the US. Now, just in case you didn't realize it, Iranian people were for Mossadegh against the Shah. Shah dictated, Mossadegh not as much. So, and this whole operation, the coup d'etat and everything, was named Operation Ajax, AJAX. So, yeah. And while the people of Iran suspected that the CIA was involved in this, the US government kept this secret from the American people. So it wasn't really let out that the CIA was like really involved in this. Like nobody really knew. At least American people didn't really know about it. So it was basically a success for the CIA and the MI6. So yeah, now on to Guatemala. Hey guys, I know I'm talking a lot right now, and I just wanted to say that there's going to be no more video footage from here on out because I'm also trying to finish the other questions as well. So basically all you have to do is just listen. You don't actually have to be on this screen to watch because it's going to be a black screen. And so this is Guatemala and Indonesia. Thank you. Hey guys, so I know I've been talking a lot, and I'm going to try to wrap this up shortly with Guatemala and Indonesia meshed together. So, bear with me. So, in Guatemala in 1954, the CIA created their first covert operation. So, Guatemala was the first covert operation of the CIA under Eisenhower's new look on foreign policy. And so, basically what happened was that Eisenhower was convinced that the leader in Guatemala, I'm gonna mess this up, but Jacobo Arbenez Guzman was a threat to U.S. national security because of his alleged communist sympathies. And so that's when Eisenhower approved the first ever clandestine military action in Latin America. So this operation was codenamed PB Success, and the program aimed at not only disposing Arbenez in favor of a U.S. elected leader, but also looked to send a clear warning to the Soviets that the American government would not tolerate the spread of communism in the Western Hemisphere. So, CIA had to do this without any American troops, and that's what Eisenhower told them. So, the CIA established training camps for the opposition army in the bordering nations of Nicaragua and Honduras to compensate for the small number of men that they had that were choosing to involve themselves in this operation. The CIA went to devise a massive propaganda campaign in Guatemala to convince the population of the invincibility of the forces seeking to take control of the country. So, also, the CIA conducted a series of intense psychological battles against the supporters of Arbenez. So basically what the CIA would do would be anywhere between phone warnings in the middle of the night to Arbenez supporters, or even death threats. So basically the US-backed troops invaded Guatemala with the intention of overthrowing Arbenez, and that realizing that his army had basically left him, and fearing for his life, Arbenez resigned as the president and fled to Mexico. And the U.S. chosen leader of the military coup, Carlos Castillo Armas, assumed control of the government, and thus ensuring the promotion of American interests in Guatemala. But now, shortly after the change of powers in Guatemala, the CIA director, Allen W. Dulles, one of the Dulles brothers, went to Eisenhower to discuss the details of PB Success, because remember, this is the first ever CIA covert operation through Eisenhower's new look on foreign policy. But what Dulles said was that only basically one U.S.-backed soldier had lost his life, when in reality, at least 48 men lost their lives during the attack, like U.S.-backed soldiers. So 48 of U.S.-backed soldiers lost their lives. But thinking that only one U.S.-backed soldier had perished during this attack, Eisenhower this PB success became basically a model for future CIA actions, and because Eisenhower thought it was quick and bloodless. So basically that's what happened in Guatemala. And quite frankly, you probably want to use Guatemala and Iran, but in case you want to know what happened in Indonesia too, this is what happened. So Indonesia was more of a typical Cold War intelligence operations, not as much as a coup d'etat. This is kind of different. So the U.S. maintained normal diplomatic relations with Indonesia or Sukarno's government in Jakarta. Sukarno was the leader in Indonesia at the time. But although they maintained normal diplomatic relations, the Eisenhower administration was secretly intervened in military actions against him. And this is because John Foster Dulles said at one key meeting that Sukarno was dangerous, untrustworthy, and by character susceptible to the communist way of thinking. So the U.S. began secretly supplying and supporting dissident military groups on Indonesia's outer islands of Sumatra and Sulawesi. And there was a lot of evidence that the U.S. supported and encouraged the rebellion, but the rebellion eventually failed. So this didn't really go as the U.S. had planned. Basically, what happened before, we know that it failed. So the U.S. used the CIA to rally rebels to try to support the rebels in Indonesia trying to destroy Sukarno's reign of power. And so basically what happened was that Indonesia knew that the CIA was mounting covert operations in Indonesia, because Indonesia had began complaining about the CIA's activities after it shot down and captured an American pilot, Alan Pope, who was bombing military targets in support of the rebels. So finally Eisenhower was like, okay, so the rebels are going to fail, so I need to come up with a new idea. So what Eisenhower did was, instead of backing the rebels, he changed to try to throw U.S. support to the regular Indonesian army that had fighting them, in hopes that the military leaders would provide a counterweight to Sukarno and Indonesia's Communist Party. So basically, like, trying to get the military leaders in the Indonesian army to rally behind the U.S. And so basically what happened was this strategy was more effective, and the Indonesian military leaders, led by General Suharto, took control of the country and gradually eased Sukarno from power. And so yeah, that's basically what happened in Indonesia and Guatemala.